They're not antisocial, depressed, or broken. They are simply awake. In a noisy world that worships constant connection, they choose something few understand: solitude. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." To the untrained eye, solitude looks like isolation, but to the awakened Stoic, it's sanctuary. It's not about running from people, it's about returning to oneself. In a world filled with opinions, demands, and distractions, the Stoic mind knows that silence is not absence, it's power. And what's even more fascinating is that this kind of solitude is not loneliness, it's alignment with something higher. Today, we're uncovering why awakened individuals quietly withdraw into solitude, not because they're broken, but because they've learned to protect what is sacred, the stillness within. The truth is, awakening doesn't make you more social. It makes solitude essential for survival of your peace. When your inner world becomes alive, when your thoughts grow deeper and your awareness sharper, you begin to feel every interaction differently. The noise of trivial talk, the drama of daily life, the constant rush, all of it starts to drain you. Seneca warned of this centuries ago. Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. The Stoic doesn't reject others. He simply understands that not all company nurtures the soul. Solitude becomes the forge where inner character is built. When your consciousness expands, external noise becomes interference. You begin to sense the difference between what feeds you and what distracts you. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Because stepping into solitude often makes the awakened individual appear distant, detached, even cold. But what they're really doing is protecting the sacred dialogue happening within. They are listening to a voice beyond noise, the voice of reason, of wisdom, of logos, as the Stoics called it, the rational order of the universe that speaks only in silence. In solitude, the awakened Stoic begins the most important conversation of all, the dialogue between the self and the higher self. The Stoics called this living according to nature, aligning one's thoughts with the natural order of the cosmos. Marcus Aurelius practiced it daily in his meditations, writing to himself, questioning his motives, confronting his weaknesses, refining his soul. It wasn't an escape from life, it was participation in it at the deepest level. Through solitude, they sharpen their perception, see their emotions clearly, and detach from illusions that keep others enslaved to external validation. But here's the paradox that few understand. Solitude doesn't isolate the awakened, it connects them. Because in silence, they realize they are never truly alone. They feel part of the great order of life, the Stoic logos, the rational harmony that flows through everything. The more they retreat from chaos, the closer they move toward this truth. And this realization changes everything: how they speak, how they act, how they see the world. It's why Stoics value solitude as a necessity, not a luxury. It's where clarity is born, and where the true self emerges. Yet solitude isn't just about peace, it's also about confrontation. Because when the noise fades, what's left is the raw mirror of who you are, and many fear that reflection. But the Stoic welcomes it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The awakened individual doesn't hide from his thoughts. He wrestles with them, refines them, transforms them into wisdom. Solitude becomes as his arena, and the opponent is his own ignorance. So if lately you've found yourself craving quiet, seeking distance, or feeling drained by constant social noise, you're not falling apart. You're waking up. You're beginning to hear the inner whisper that most have forgotten how to listen to. And that whisper has more truth in it than 1,000 conversations ever could. Because as the Stoics knew, the quieter you become, the stronger you grow. But solitude's importance runs deeper than this first layer. There's something few talk about. The hidden reason why the awakened Stoic often feels exhausted around others. It's not arrogance. It's not withdrawal. It's something far more profound. And once you understand it, you'll never see solitude the same way again. There's a reason the awakened Stoic often walks away quietly. It's not because they dislike people, it's because they understand how easily the mind absorbs what surrounds it. Seneca warned, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The Stoic knows that most suffering doesn't originate from external chaos itself, but from the mind's reaction to it, from allowing the noise of others to invade the stillness of the soul. In a world where everyone projects their frustrations, fears, and desires outward, the Stoic stands guard at the gates of his mind. He understands that emotional energy is contagious, and that tranquility is a fragile flame. One careless conversation can extinguish it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." The awakened individual realizes that constant exposure to negativity, gossip, or shallow pursuits stains the purity of one's perception. This is why Stoics deliberately choose solitude, not to reject humanity, but to preserve their clarity amidst collective confusion. When the masses chase approval, the Stoic retreats into stillness. Because he knows that peace is not found in the crowd, but in control of one's mind. This is not detachment born of arrogance. It's awareness born of wisdom. Epictetus taught his students to be cautious of who they spent time with, warning that the undisciplined mind will unconsciously imitate whatever it frequently sees and hears. He said, "If you are not careful, you will become like those with whom you associate." To the Stoic, solitude is protection, a necessary barrier between the mind's calm waters and the storm of collective emotion. Because once you awaken, you start noticing things others overlook: the hidden tension in people's words, the subtle envy behind compliments, the quiet despair in their laughter. You begin to sense not just what people say, but what they carry. And that awareness is both a gift and a burden. The awakened Stoic doesn't just hear the world, he feels it. Every interaction becomes a wave of unseen energy, frustrations, expectations, projections, crashing against the shores of his consciousness. In crowded rooms, he feels drained, not because of others' presence, but because of their inner turbulence. Seneca called this the madness of the crowd, warning that being constantly among others risks losing the integrity of one's own reason. The awakened individual senses this instinctively. Solitude becomes a retreat to cleanse the mind from emotional contamination. You see, the Stoics didn't preach isolation, but they did preach mastery over influence. They taught that a free mind cannot remain free if it's constantly absorbing the unexamined emotions of others. Modern psychology calls it emotional contagion, the involuntary absorption of others' moods. Stoicism understood this long ago. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do. That's not indifferent. See, that's liberation. The Stoic shields his mind not with walls, but with awareness. He chooses solitude to renew that awareness, to return to the inner fortress where his peace cannot be invaded. When you awaken, even simple social gatherings begin to feel heavier. Conversations that once entertained you now exhaust you. You notice how people speak to fill silence rather than understand it. You recognize how much of what's said is just ego seeking attention. And when you see this clearly, it becomes impossible to unsee. So the awakened Stoic withdraws, not from people, but from pretense. He'd rather spend an hour in silence with his soul than a day lost in shallow noise, because silence teaches him more than noise ever could. Seneca compared the mind to a lamp. Too much wind, and the flame flickers. The Stoic learns to guard that flame by limiting exposure to what disturbs it. This is what the awakened person does instinctively. They guard their peace as if it were life itself, because it is. In solitude, the lamp burns steady. In company, it's tested by every gust of emotion passing through the room. The Stoic doesn't avoid the world. He prepares himself to face it stronger by retreating often into stillness. But here's what few realize. The deeper you go into solitude, the more your perception changes. The outer world begins to lose its color, not from indifference, but because something even more vivid awakens inside you. The Stoics spoke of the inner citadel, a place within where nothing external can harm you. And once you start dwelling there, the outer world feels strangely thin by comparison. What if the reason you crave solitude isn't exhaustion at all, but the first sign that you're entering this inner citadel? Because beyond the silence lies something extraordinary, a world within that's more alive, more meaningful, and more real than anything you've known before. And it's there, in that quiet world, that the awakened Stoic finds what most spend their lives chasing outside. But what exactly is this inner world? Why does it become so magnetizing? See once you awaken, and why does it make ordinary life seem dull by comparison? The answer lies in the third reason Stoics embrace solitude. And it's not about withdrawal, but revelation. Something profound happens when a Stoic truly embraces solitude. The noise of the outer world fades, and suddenly what's inside becomes more real than what's outside. Marcus Aurelius described this experience in his Meditations when he wrote, "Men seek retreats for themselves, in the country, by the sea, in the mountains. But it is possible for you to retire into yourself at any hour you wish." What he meant was that the awakened mind doesn't need to escape the world. It carries its own sanctuary within. When the Stoic retreats inward, the external world doesn't disappear. It simply becomes secondary to the deeper, more vivid realm of the soul. This is the moment when solitude transforms from stillness into discovery. The awakened Stoic begins to realize that the mind is not an empty room, but an entire universe waiting to be explored. Within this universe are lessons, visions, and revelations that cannot be accessed through constant distraction. Seneca spoke of this in his letters. Withdraw into yourself as far as you can. Associate with those who will make a better man of you, and the best of these is yourself. The inner world becomes a teacher, a companion, a sacred landscape filled with meaning. In silence, the Stoic starts to hear the whisper of the Logos, the rational divine order that connects all things. For the unawakened, solitude feels like emptiness. For the awakened Stoic, it's overflowing. Every thought, every breath, every moment becomes infused with significance. They start seeing patterns where others see chaos, meaning where others see coincidence. Marcus Aurelius called this the sympathy of all things, the understanding that everything in nature is interconnected. When you live from this awareness, life stops feeling random. You begin to see that every challenge, every setback, every encounter carries a lesson from the universe itself. This realization makes the inner world so vivid, so nourishing, that outer distractions lose their power. In solitude, the Stoic's imagination doesn't run wild. It awakens to truth. Epictetus taught that the greatest battles happen not in the streets or in the courts, but within our own judgments. The awakened mind starts observing these judgments, dissecting them, refining them, replacing the false with the true. This inner observation feels like standing in a grand hall of mirrors, each reflection revealing a deeper aspect of your nature. The Stoic begins to converse with reason itself, asking questions, receiving insights, and aligning more closely with virtue. These moments are not fantasy. They are experiences of pure awareness. To live in this state is to discover what Marcus called the inner citadel, a fortress of clarity that no external event can penetrate. In solitude, this fortress becomes fully visible. You realize that peace isn't something to achieve, it's something to uncover, hidden beneath the noise of constant engagement. The awakened Stoic starts to taste a level of serenity that others can't comprehend, a peace so complete that it feels eternal. The outer world begins to feel like an echo of this deeper reality, not the other way around. This is why, to the awakened, solitude is not deprivation. It's communion with what's most real. What's extraordinary is that this inner vividness doesn't disconnect you from life. It connects you more deeply. The Stoics didn't withdraw to escape the world. They withdrew to understand it. Marcus, even as emperor, found time each day to be alone with his thoughts. Seneca, surrounded by the decadence of Rome, retreated inward to maintain his sanity. Epictetus, born a slave, discovered freedom not through escape, but through mastering his inner life. Solitude was their gateway to understanding reality as it truly is, but not as the crowd perceives it. And yet, this transformation carries its own challenge. When the inner world becomes brighter than the outer, the Stoic begins to feel a quiet distance from ordinary life. Conversations feel shallow, worldly ambitions lose flavor, and even pleasure seems hollow compared to the fulfillment found within. This isn't depression, it's awakening. The Stoic realizes that the external world, though beautiful, is temporary, while the inner world, aligned with virtue and reason, is eternal. He starts to crave not entertainment, but understanding, not attention, but truth. This inner vividness changes the way you live. Suddenly, solitude becomes nourishment. A quiet morning with your journal feels richer than a night of socializing. A moment of reflection feels more satisfying than a day of achievements. You begin to recognize that life's deepest treasures, wisdom, peace, self-respect, are mined in silence, not in noise. The Stoic learns that to know oneself fully is to live fully. And yet, this isn't the end of solitude's purpose. It's only the threshold. Because the Stoic's journey doesn't stop at inner discovery. There's a deeper necessity, the ongoing work of integration. You've gathered insights, faced truths, seen the architecture of your soul, but now it must all be digested, transformed into action, into virtue, into daily life. And that work, as the ancient Stoics knew, can only be done alone. Solitude isn't just a pause, it's a process. The awakened Stoic knows that every insight, every lesson, every struggle must be forged into strength through reflection. Seneca compared the mind to metal. It must be hammered, tempered, and shaped before it becomes unbreakable. And solitude is the fire where that transformation takes place. The world offers distractions. Solitude demands honesty. It strips away excuses and leaves you face to face with your own contradictions. It's here, in silence, that the Stoic begins the sacred work of integration, transforming understanding into character, philosophy into living truth. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this process every morning in his meditations. He didn't write for others. He wrote to remind himself how to live. Each line was a weapon against forgetfulness, a way to pull wisdom from reflection into behavior. In solitude, he confronted his own weaknesses: impatience, pride, anger, desire for recognition. He turned them into lessons. He wasn't seeking perfection. He was seeking progress, what he called living in agreement with nature, meaning harmony between what you think, say, and do. That harmony cannot exist without solitude, because the noise of the world constantly pulls you out of alignment. Seneca wrote, "Withdraw into yourself as far as you can. Associate with those who will make you better, and the best of these is yourself." He knew that solitude was not about isolation, but purification. In the quiet, the Stoic processes the raw material of experience, pain, failure, temptation, and refines it into virtue. When you're alone, You can't perform. There's no one to impress. The mask falls away. What remains is truth. And sometimes that truth hurts. But the Stoic faces it willingly, because only through confrontation does transformation occur. Epictetus often told his students, "First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Solitude is where that decision happens. It's where clarity forms about who you wish to become and what must change to get there. The Stoic doesn't just sit in silence. He wrestles with his own soul. He examines his motives. He replays his day, as Seneca advised at night. "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said." This nightly solitude is not self-criticism, it's self-construction. Through honest reflection, the Stoic integrates wisdom into his bloodstream. But integration isn't easy, it's uncomfortable. Because when you're alone long enough, the shadows appear, the parts of yourself you avoid in the noise of company. The Stoic sees this as essential. To conquer the self, you must first meet it. Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Solitude is where that realization happens. You confront your anger, your fear, your attachment to praise. You study them not as enemies, but as teachers. The Stoic doesn't flee from his flaws. He learns their language. And something miraculous happens during this process. Peace begins to replace confusion. Virtue starts to feel natural. Wisdom becomes not an idea, but a reflex. You find yourself responding differently, with calm instead of anger, with restraint instead of reaction, with compassion instead of judgment. This is what Stoics meant by the inner citadel, the fortress of reason that can't be shaken by the chaos of life. But that fortress isn't built in public, it's built in private, one reflection at a time. Integration also requires rhythm. Marcus practiced it daily. Seneca wrote letters as part of it. Epictetus taught students to examine every impression before acting. The awakened Stoic learns to alternate between engagement and withdrawal, like breathing. After a day of living among people, they retreat to solitude to process what occurred. After a burst of insight, they sit in silence to let it settle. They don't run from life, but they know life cannot be lived wisely without reflection. Solitude becomes the balance that keeps the soul from being consumed by the world. But this inner work doesn't stop with the personal. The Stoic understands that by refining himself, he contributes to something larger. Marcus wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." The inverse is also true. When the bee becomes stronger, the hive benefits. Each moment of solitary reflection strengthens not only the individual, but humanity's collective reason. By facing himself, the Stoic helps heal the world, not by preaching, but by embodying wisdom. Still, there's one final reason solitude is sacred, one that transcends philosophy and touches the very core of existence. Beyond reflection, beyond integration, solitude reveals the truest thing about the awakened soul, who you are when there's no one left to perform for. It's in this ultimate silence that the Stoic encounters his real nature, stripped of titles, roles, and expectations. And in that discovery lies freedom, greater than any empire. But what exactly is this self that the Stoic meets in solitude? And why is this encounter the final step of awakening? When the awakened Stoic goes deep enough into solitude, he reaches a point where even thought begins to dissolve. All ambitions, identities, and comparisons fade, and what remains is a simple, undeniable awareness. I am here. This is the self that Marcus Aurelius glimpsed when he wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig." After all the searching, striving, and reflecting, the Stoic realizes that peace was never something to be earned. It was something to be remembered. Solitude isn't an escape from life. It's a return to it, in its purest form. This realization transforms everything. The Stoic begins to see that what he once feared, loneliness, stillness, silence, was never an enemy. It was a teacher. The absence of others becomes the presence of truth. The quiet reveals what the noise was hiding. And in that stillness, a new kind of strength emerges. Not the brittle pride of control, but the calm certainty of alignment. Seneca called this the tranquil mind, a state where nothing external can disturb your peace, because your peace no longer depends on anything external. The world can crumble, and yet the Stoic remains grounded, because his foundation lies within. In Solitude, the awakened Stoic finally understands the essence of freedom. Epictetus, born into slavery, discovered this truth long before he was legally free. He taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And mastery begins here, in the silence where you are forced to face the only person you can truly govern, yourself. Solitude strips away illusions of control. You can't manipulate silence, impress it, or argue with it. You can only meet it with honesty. And when you do, you uncover something eternal. A mind unshaken by fortune, a soul anchored in reason, and a heart that no longer fears loss, because it understands that no thing real can be taken away. What begins as solitude soon becomes unity. The Stoic, sitting alone, starts to feel deeply connected, not to people's opinions, but to life itself. Marcus called this the community of reason, the sense that every living thing shares the same spark of the divine logos. In solitude, that spark burns brightest. You start to see the same intelligence that moves the stars moving within you. You sense that your struggles are not separate from the world's story, but a reflection of it. This is why Stoics could remain calm in chaos. They saw themselves as part of something vast, ordered, and purposeful. When you reach this depth, solitude no longer feels like separation. It feels like belonging. The awakened Stoic doesn't need constant validation because he has made peace with the truth of who he is. He doesn't chase admiration or escape criticism because both belong to the realm of noise. He lives for one thing only: virtue, excellence of soul, harmony with nature, alignment with truth. This quiet clarity becomes his compass. He acts not to impress, but to contribute, not to control, but to cooperate with the natural order. His calm presence becomes a form of leadership, silent, steady, and unshakable. But the paradox of awakening is this: once you find peace in solitude, you return to the world with new eyes. You don't isolate. You engage, but differently. You no longer need people to fill your emptiness, because you are already whole. You give without expecting, listen without defending, and love without clinging. Solitude teaches you how to be with others without losing yourself. It teaches you how to be in the world, but not of it. This is the Stoic's quiet power, to walk through life untouched by chaos, not because he avoids it, but because he understands it. So, why do awakened individuals quietly choose solitude? Because they have learned that only in silence can you hear the truth of your soul. Only in solitude can you see the patterns of fate without distortion. And only through solitude can you transform knowledge into wisdom. The Stoic doesn't choose solitude to escape humanity. He chooses it to understand it. He steps away not to reject the world, but to return to it wiser, calmer, and stronger. Marcus Aurelius spent his final days in reflection, writing words that still echo through centuries. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. That's the heart of Stoicism, to master yourself so deeply that no circumstance can enslave you again. Solitude is not emptiness. It's the presence of everything that truly matters: reason, virtue, and peace. And once you've tasted that kind of freedom, the noise of the world can never touch you again. So, If you ever feel alone, remember, it's not loneliness. It's an invitation. The universe is calling you inward, asking you to meet yourself, to forge your character, and to awaken your spirit. Walk that path. Build your inner citadel. Become so grounded in truth that nothing, not chaos, not failure, not fear, can move you from your peace. That is the way of the Stoic. That is the quiet power of solitude.